The Super Nintendo is one of my favorite consoles of all time and is known for having some of the best platforming games on it. Well, coincidentally, platforming games are some of my favorite video games ever. So today, we're gonna be looking at the best platforming games on the Super Nintendo. In no particular order. Super Mario World is a must-have for any best platformers list, regardless of whether or not the Super Nintendo is involved. I'm sure you've all heard of it and already know it's good, but like, this game is good. The colors are good, the sprites are good, the worlds are well made, the levels are fun, the enemies are memorable, the boss battles as a kid were really intense, but now I can beat it easy peasy. The controls are crisp and feel so good to use that people are still making ROM hacks of this game, with multiple people competing to beat them the fastest nearly 30 years after the game release because it is such a good game. I know that a lot of people, despite watching all of these videos claiming that Super Mario World is an amazing work of art, still have not played the game, but for the love of God, please play the game. While watching the game certainly is fun, there is nothing that can compare to actually playing and beating Super Mario World to see what it has to offer for yourself. I've played and beaten this game probably more than 50 times, and I still put it in my Super Nintendo to play every now and then because it never gets old. And I've been playing this game since I was 2. Super Mario World is one of the most solid and well-made platformers ever to be made, and the fact that Nintendo could do all that on just a Super Nintendo cartridge is a universal mystery that even this guy can't solve. And then suddenly, bam, Donkey Kong Country. Somehow they've managed to put CGI on the Super Nintendo in the form of a platformer game that rivals Super Mario World. Fast-paced level design, vehicle levels, a soundtrack that's still remixed to this day in Smash. You get to ride a rhino, what is this, Crash Bandicoot? But oh, you like that? Bam, here's 2 more. Now you have an amazing trilogy of Donkey Kong Country games on the Super Nintendo, all with their own amazing features and additions. Multiple different characters to play as, a villain so memorable that die-hard fans repeatedly requested for him to be in Smash Bros. Since Melee, until Sakurai himself finally caved in and said, alright, here you go. Never ask me for anything again. The Donkey Kong Country trilogy became known for not only being one of the best platforming trilogies on the Super Nintendo, but also for having some of the most advanced graphics for any Super Nintendo game ever. But then Kirby's Dream Land 3 came out. Kirby and his friends can team up and combine to enhance his abilities. Nintendo managed to put a crayon art style into a Super Nintendo game and make it work flawlessly. Kirby has a new friend who's a blue blob. His name is Gooey. While Donkey Kong Country pushed the technical limits of the Super Nintendo with its CGI graphics, Kirby's Dream Land 3 used the Super Nintendo to its limits in order to portray its pretty art style, which makes the game look like it was drawn by Kirby himself in his storybook. The game has a ton of Nintendo Easter eggs and references, the levels are surprisingly fun, and this is actually my favorite Kirby platformer game of all. Kirby Superstar also released earlier on the Super Nintendo with 8 games in one. Not only were there Kirby mini-games to play, but there were also multiple multiplayer Kirby platforming games that are all a blast to play. The game was so good it was remade on the Nintendo DS in Kirby Superstar Ultra, which people loved. With all of these groundbreaking platforming games being released for the Super Nintendo, there was bound to be some other companies trying to get in on the trend and create competition. And while most of the other companies' games weren't good, soon came Super Castlevania 4. Not only is this considered to be one of the best Castlevania games in the entire franchise, but it's a completely perfect remake of how the original NES Castlevania games felt. Castlevania had never looked better up to this point. The mechanics feel good, the music is better than ever with remixed tracks from the original as well, the bosses look like what the original bosses wished they were. Super Castlevania 4 manages to keep the gameplay and level design of the original while improving it significantly to almost an unrecognizable level if you were able to play this first and then the originals after at least. Castlevania is to Super Castlevania what Metroid is to Super Metroid. But Konami said, oh, you like that, huh? Bam! Contra 3 The Alien Wars. Yeah, remember what we did with Castlevania? Well, we just did it to Contra 2. Amazing graphics, insane gameplay and level design, better controls, remixed soundtrack, and the 2-player mode is still there. The bosses are even more insane than they were in the original Contra games, which is not only saying a lot, but also pushed the limits of the Super Nintendo, which is what any good platforming game should strive to do. Contra 3 is one of the most intense action-packed games on the entire Super Nintendo, let alone platformer-wise. It's also one of the hardest, which is made up for by its unique level design and really cool world building. But hearing about Konami's success in the Super Nintendo platformer business, even Disney decided to make one. Okay, now I know what you're thinking. Movie games are always bad, so there's no way Disney, of all people, could do any— BAM! Aladdin for the Super Nintendo. I don't know what Disney executive did crack and decided to make one of the greatest platforming games of all time for the Super Nintendo under the Aladdin IP of all things, but if somebody finds him, tell him to hook me up with whatever crack he's smoking, because I want a bite. You wouldn't think this game would be good, but you would be wrong, because it is good, you uncultured swine. The mechanics and the way the game feels is one of the most important things in a platformer game, which Aladdin nails. It feels satisfying to jump on these enemies. I want to get the apples. The weird casino thing at the end of each level really makes me want to keep playing the game for some reason. I promise I'm not a gambling addict. And of course, the game looks and sounds amazing with the classic Super Nintendo Disney soundtrack remixes. This is of course another game you have to play for yourself to truly understand, but the fact that me and so many other people talk about an Aladdin Disney game should be enough of a sign that this game is a masterpiece. Bam! Super Star Wars. I know Disney didn't own Star Wars at the time, but these games were amazing. They look surprisingly good for being on the Super Nintendo too. These games are known for being extremely hard, but compared to literally every single other Star Wars video game that existed at the time, these were not only the best by far, but also amazing platforming games. You get to play as the cool Star Wars characters, explore the Star Wars worlds, and if that wasn't enough for you, then bam, here's 2 more so you can have one for each movie. While these debatably aren't as good as some of the other games I've talked about, these are still amazing and really fun to play to this day. The level design reminds me of an early version of some of even the LEGO Star Wars games, surprisingly, and the soundtrack is Star Wars, so of course it sounds good. But with all of these companies putting amazing platforming games on the Super Nintendo, there was bound to be one to rule them all, which was Capcom. Bam! Mega Man X. Do I even have to tell you how awesome this game is? Everyone and their 14th cousin has heard of Mega Man X, and if you haven't played it yet, what's the matter with you? It's just like Mega Man from the NES, but more extreme. Get it? Groundbreaking level design, amazing graphics, more explosions than even the original, a deeper storyline that actually goes slightly in depth, unlike the NES games, a new heavy metal based soundtrack, and now you have the ability to climb walls, which just makes Mega Man X not only completely unique in terms of gameplay from the original, but also easily one of the best platformer games ever to exist. So Capcom said, here, have another. Mega Man X2 did everything that Mega Man X did, but added even more stuff. More amazing levels, the controls feel just as smooth and crisp as ever, which they need to for all the tight platforming. You even ride cyber-futuristic motorcycles in this game. What more could you ask for? Well, you don't have time to ask for anything, because while you're playing yet again one of the best platforming games of all time, Capcom stops you mid-game and says, by the way, basically there's this magic jewel that we put a microchip in, specifically in every Mega Man X2 Super Nintendo cartridge in the world, that pretty much just lets the game go above and beyond the Super Nintendo's capabilities and produce insane wireframe graphics. Then, before you can even ask what on earth they're talking about, bam, you see all these colorful wireframe bosses throughout the entire game that are all fun to play against and look really cool on CRT TVs. Again, one of the most amazing games of all time. Bam! Mega Man X3. More amazing levels, more unique level design. This time you get to play as Zero, who's completely overpowered, and you can unlock golden super armor that allows you to fly into the air with dashes, along with healing your health by doing absolutely nothing. You can also collect these giant mechs, each with different abilities like punching or shooting missiles. Oh, also, this game has that super powerful jewel in it too, don't worry. Mega Man X3 is personally my favorite of the Mega Man X games, and I spent hundreds of thousands of hours playing these games as a kid, and bam! Capcom doesn't care that you're satisfied, here's Mega Man 7. Are you too much of a baby to play Mega Man X? Well, here's Mega Man 7, except this isn't for babies either, you stupid baby. Go to Weenie Hut Jr. Mega Man 7 takes all of the amazing platforming and level design from the original Mega Man platforming games that were already so great on the NES and improved it. Look, in this game you can still slide and charge your shots, but also now you can combine with Rush and turn into a super flying Mega Man that everyone wishes was in the original 6 games, but just isn't because the Super Nintendo is too good. Mega Man 7 isn't known as the best Mega Man game in the entire franchise by any means, and it frequently gets overshadowed by Mega Man X, but I assure you Mega Man 7 is also a really amazing game and worth playing whether or not you're a Mega Man fan. With all of these other companies making some of the most amazing platformers of all time on the Super Nintendo, Nintendo themselves decided to step up their game. Sure, Super Mario World, the Donkey Kong Country trilogy, and even the Kirby games are amazing, but Nintendo didn't think that was enough. They wanted to completely dominate the platformer industry on Super Nintendo because it's their console, for crying out loud. So Nintendo decided they were going to create the absolute perfect platforming game for the Super Nintendo, and they did. They made the best platforming game ever to exist. Super Metroid is the greatest video game of all time. The fact that I can make that statement about a Super Nintendo game from the 90s in the modern day 2020s only to find out most people agree with me should be a statement in itself. There is no game on this earth as perfectly crafted as Super Metroid is. The atmosphere and world building of the game is unlike anything the Super Nintendo has ever dreamed of. One second you're in the abandoned outer area of the planet only to run into the destroyed ruins of the original game. You go from the beautiful overgrown vegetation area of Brinstar to the underground lava pits of Norfair within minutes of each other, and the transitions between the worlds are seamless. Other platformer games have memorable songs or enemies, but every single room in Super Metroid is memorable. And if you don't believe me, just go ahead and ask a single person who's ever completed the game all the way through. This game is so good, it got its own genre named after it. Super Metroid is still a platformer game, but it started the Metroidvania genre that other games have followed in the footsteps of, because on top of just the platforming aspects of this game being amazing and better than any of the other games on this list, Super Metroid is not linear and encourages exploration. You can beat Super Metroid in pretty much any way you want to, and the many different speedrunning categories for the game should have proved that in itself. You want to beat the last boss first? Well, go right ahead. You want to beat the game with almost no items? Go ahead and try it. There is no game on the Super Nintendo that comes close to making you feel the way Super Metroid makes you feel. While you're playing the best video game you'll ever get a chance to play, Super Metroid does its best to make you feel like you are Samus as you play. At first, you're alone in the abandoned world, only to go deeper and deeper into the unknown planet as you grow more powerful. Toward the end of the game, you visit the beginning area multiple times with new music playing, signifying your progression as Samus in terms of upgrades and getting better at the game. It doesn't matter how many times I play Super Metroid, it is literally impossible to get tired of, and the only reason I don't play it constantly is because if I did, I would be hospitalized for addiction. But regardless of whether or not you agree with me, those are what I consider to be the best platformer games on the entire Super Nintendo. And no, I did not forget about Super Mario World 2 because the crying in that game hurts my head, and no game that hurts my head deserves to be S tier.